At 72 years old, I thought my battles were over. I had worked my whole life as an engineer, raised 3 children, and after my wife passed, I tried to live quietly with what little peace I had left. But one morning, a letter from the bank nearly stopped my heart. It thanked me for taking out a line of credit $500,000 in my name. I had never borrowed a dime in my life. I thought it was a mistake. Until I found out the truth, my own daughter had forged my signature, tricked a notary, and stolen my identity to buy her husband a luxurious mansion in Maple Hills. And here's the twist. Instead of letting them bury me in debt, I took the keys to that mansion and moved in myself. My name is Howard Whitaker. I've lived in Boulder, Colorado my whole life. I built bridges, hospitals, and schools as a civil engineer for more than 40 years. I buried my wife, Miriam, 5 years ago, and since then, I've lived quietly in the house we once built together. My life has been simple: early mornings, strong coffee, peanut butter toast, and evening walks, where I thank God for keeping me on my feet another day. I never believed in debt. My father taught me that if you can't pay cash, you don't need it. For decades, I kept that principle. No loans, no mortgages, just work, save, and pray. So when the letter arrived thanking me for using my line of credit, my hands shook. Not from age, from anger. $500,000. Enough to buy a mansion in Maple Hills, the most luxurious neighborhood in Boulder. I called the bank immediately. After long minutes of music that grated on my nerves, a young operator told me calmly, "Mr. Whitaker, you personally visited our office 2 weeks ago. You signed all the necessary documents." That was impossible. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting at the VA hospital waiting for test results with 6 veterans who could confirm it. But the bank insisted they had my signature and a copy of my ID. Someone had stolen my name. I hung up, my heart pounding, and stared at the walls of my living room. Pictures of Miriam smiled down at me. I whispered, "Lord, give me strength." My children came into my mind. My daughter Dana is a real estate agent. Her husband Eli works in finance. They drive a Lexus, wear designer clothes, and complain endlessly about how unfair life is that they can't afford their dream home. They have champagne tastes and a beer budget, as my father would say, and now a loan in my name. A house in Maple Hills, and an unscheduled phone call from Dana, who almost never calls except at the end of the month out of duty. That same afternoon, she rang and chirped, "Dad, Eli and I want to come for dinner tomorrow, just to check on you." After 5 years of being treated like an obligation, now she suddenly wanted dinner. I set the phone down after agreeing, my mind racing. Could it be Dana? Could she have tricked me somehow? She'd always dismissed my values. When I warned her against debt years ago, she snapped, "Dad, your ideas are from another century. Nobody lives like that anymore." She laughed at my old Ford pickup, called my home outdated. Miriam's death only gave her more room to show her disdain. But she was still my daughter, and that made the suspicion burn hotter. That night, I walked through the house I built with my own 2 hands. Every nail, every beam, every brick was laid with care. I remembered late nights with Miriam sharing sandwiches on the floorboards before the walls even went up. We didn't have much money, but we had faith and hard work, and that was enough. Now my own child had possibly sold my name like a cheap signature. I knew one thing: if it was Dana and Eli, they had chosen the wrong man to deceive. I was old, but I wasn't weak. I still carried the discipline of a lifetime of construction sites. I still believed God expected me to stand for the truth, no matter who I stood against, even if it was my own blood. And so, as I prepared for their friendly dinner visit, I prayed quietly. Lord, if this is the storm I must walk through, then walk with me. Give me strength to face them without fear. If you're listening right now, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. These stories prove faith and dignity never die. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table staring at that letter from the bank, as though the paper itself might reveal who had betrayed me. The coffee in my mug went cold, untouched. My mind replayed Dana's voice on the phone, that sudden sweetness. It didn't fit her usual tone, sharp, hurried, laced with irritation whenever I dared offer advice. Over the years, I had learned to hold my tongue with her. Every suggestion I gave, whether about saving, about faith, or about raising her own children, was brushed off as interference. Dad times are different, she'd snap. Your kind of wisdom is obsolete. That word obsolete stung more than she realized. I'd spent my life building, planning, working. Obsolete men don't design hospitals. Obsolete men don't raise families. Obsolete men don't keep their promises to their wives until death. I thought of her life with Eli. 2 luxury vacations a year. Designer handbags that cost more than my entire grocery budget. A Lexus parked in their rented apartment's garage. Always living for show, never for substance. Every month she'd complain about Boulder's real estate market. How's it fair, Dad, that everyone else gets to own in Maple Hills, and we're still renting? I wanted to laugh. Fair. When had life ever been fair? Miriam and I had lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for 8 years before we scraped together enough to buy land for this house. I worked overtime. She stretched every penny until it squeaked. We earned what we had. Now I wondered if Dana and Eli had decided to shortcut all that hard work through me. I pulled open my desk drawer and dug out an old leather folder. Inside were documents going back decades, titles, tax receipts, Miriam's will, even letters from when I served in the Army Corps of Engineers. I flipped through them, checking for anything missing. Everything was there. Nothing obvious had been stolen. So how had they gotten my signature? That memory hit me like a hammer last December. Dana insisted on driving me to a routine doctor's appointment. My blood pressure had spiked, and she claimed she just wanted to help. On the way, she'd asked me to stop at a notary office so she could finalize some work papers. She pushed a few sheets toward me, saying she needed a witness signature. I was distracted, tired, and I trusted her. Now the realization chilled my blood. Could that have been the day she tricked me? The phone rang again, startling me. It wasn't the bank this time. It was my son, Elliot, the middle child. He rarely called. His voice was strained, casual, in the way a liar tries too hard to sound natural. Hey, Dad, just checking in. How's your health? He never asked that. My suspicion deepened. Was he involved too? I answered politely, but after we hung up, I sat in silence, staring out the window. Snow still clung to the tips of the flat irons. The Rockies have a way of reminding you what endurance looks like, stone carved by centuries of storms. That's how I wanted to be. Unmoving, unbreakable, no matter what winds of betrayal blew around me. That evening, I prepared the dining table for Dana and Eli's visit. I roasted a chicken, peeled potatoes, set out the same worn plates Miriam and I had used for years. They weren't fine china, but they held memories no money could buy. As I laid down the silverware, I whispered to myself, "Patience, Howard. Don't show your hand yet. Let them talk. Let them reveal themselves." Because now I was certain of two things. First, someone had stolen $500,000 using my name. Second, when Dana and Eli walked through my door tomorrow night, I'd find out just how deep my own children's betrayal ran. The next evening, just as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, headlights swept across my driveway. I pulled the curtains back and saw Eli's black Lexus glide to a stop. He stepped out in a tailored suit, his hair slicked back, phone still glued to his ear. Dana followed, holding a bakery box. She wore a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I stayed seated in my chair by the dining table cane, leaning against my knee, heart steady but firm. This was my battlefield now. "Dad," Dana chirped as she leaned in to kiss my cheek. "We brought dessert. Your favorite lemon cake." I nodded, taking the box from her hands. "Thoughtful of you. Sit down. Dinner's ready." The roasted chicken steamed in the middle of the table, surrounded by potatoes and green beans. Nothing fancy. Just food cooked with the same hands that had built a home and held Miriam's during her last breath. Dana immediately started fussing with the plates. "Dad, why are you still using these old dishes?" "We bought you a new set for Christmas," she said with a hint of irritation. "Old habits," I replied. "They hold better than new ones." Eli gave a sharp laugh, too loud, too forced. True. But sometimes change is good, isn't it, Howard? Not Dad, not Mr. Whitaker. Howard, my suspicion only hardened. We settled at the table. Dana poured wine. Eli raised his glass, grinning. "To family." I lifted mine slowly. "Yes, to family." My eyes stayed locked on Dana's. She looked away first. So I began carving the chicken. "How's the search for the perfect house going?" Dana nearly choked on her sip of wine. Eli patted her hand quickly. "Still looking," he answered. "Market's tough, you know. Prices keep climbing." "Yes," I said calmly. "And yet, someone managed to close on a house in Maple Hills just last week, a lovely two-story with white columns." I set down the carving knife and looked at them. "Funny thing is, the bank thinks I bought it." The silence was thick enough to cut with a blade. Dana's fork clattered onto her plate. Eli's smile twitched, his eyes narrowing. "Dad," Dana forced a laugh that must be a mistake. "You don't even like Maple Hills." "You're right," I said, my tone even. "I prefer honesty to marble floors." She set her wine glass down a little too sharply. "Did you go to the police tomorrow?" I lied smoothly. "But the bank's already investigating. They've pulled security footage. Handwriting experts are checking signatures. They tell me it's only a matter of days before the culprits are caught." I watched as Eli's knuckles whitened around his glass. Dana's face went pale. "Dad," she tried again, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't stress yourself like this. At your age, worry is dangerous for your heart. Maybe let me handle the paperwork. You know I deal with documents every day at work." I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. "No, Dana. I built bridges that still stand after 40 winters. I handled payroll for crews of 200 men without a mistake. I can manage my own name." For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, Eli forced another laugh, thin and brittle. "Well, mistakes happen, right? Maybe someone who looks like you, maybe some mix-up. Best not to worry until the truth comes out." "Yes," I said quietly. the truth always comes out. Dinner dragged on after that, every bite strained. They picked at the food, glancing at each other, whispering between forced smiles. By dessert, they excused themselves early, claiming an early morning meeting. When the door closed behind them, I sat back in my chair, staring at the empty plates. My suspicions were no longer suspicions. They were certainties. My daughter and her husband had stolen my name. And tonight, they'd betrayed themselves with every nervous glance and every broken smile. 3 days passed after that tense dinner, each one dragging like a heavy chain. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house at night felt like Miriam's voice telling me, "Howard, find the truth. Don't let them bury you in lies." So I called an old friend, Rodney Miles. Back in the day, Rodney and I built half the office towers downtown together. After retirement, he'd reinvented himself as a private investigator, tracking cheating spouses and shady insurance claims. If anyone could dig through the dirt my daughter and her husband had piled up, it was him. "Howard," he said. When I explained, "You're telling me your own daughter pulled a $500,000 scam in your name, I wish I weren't," I answered. Rodney sighed. "Give me a few days. I'll get you proof." While he worked, I tried to keep my routine. I walked the block each morning, cane tapping against the pavement, praying under my breath. "Lord, don't let bitterness poison me, but give me strength to see clearly." Faith was the only thing holding me steady. On the 4th day, Rodney called. His voice was brisk. "Meet me at the diner on Pearl Street. You need to see this in person." When I arrived, he already had a thick folder spread across the booth. "Brace yourself," he said, sliding it toward me. The first page nearly stopped my heart. A photograph of a gleaming white-columned mansion in Maple Hills. Manicured lawns, marble fountain, 3-car garage, the sort of home Dana had drooled over for years. "Closed 4 days ago," Rodney said. "Purchase price $480,000. The remaining $20,000 from your loan went to furnishings, landscaping, and a custom pool installation." My throat went dry. "Whose name, not Dana's," Rodney said grimly. "All in Eli Peyton's, your son-in-law." She didn't even get her name on the deed. I stared at the picture until the edges blurred. My own daughter had tied her future to a man who cared so little, he locked her out of ownership. Rodney flipped to the next document. "Here's the kicker. They didn't forge your signature this time. They used a general power of attorney notarized last December." My stomach dropped. December. The doctor's appointment. The detour Dana insisted we make. The papers she'd slid in front of me with that smooth voice, just a witness signature, Dad. For work. "She tricked me," I whispered. "God help me, she tricked me." Rodney nodded. "And she didn't act alone." The witness signature, your middle son, Elliot. He signed off that day, too. For a moment, the diner spun around me. Dana, I could almost believe. She'd always chased status, looked at me as dead weight. But Elliot. He'd eaten at my table last Thanksgiving. He'd bowed his head while I prayed over the meal. And yet he'd helped his sister swindle me. I pressed my palm against the Formica table, steadying myself. "So it's a family conspiracy." "Not entirely," Rodney said. "Your eldest, Marcus, doesn't show up anywhere in this. From what I can tell, it's Dana, Eli, and Elliot, the notary who handled it. Quit her job 2 months ago, moved out to California. No forwarding address. Too convenient, if you ask me." I closed the folder and looked at my reflection in the diner window. An old man with silver hair, deep lines carved by years of labor and loss, but not broken. Not yet. What now? Rodney asked. Now, I said, voice steady. I fight. I built bridges out of steel. I can build a case out of truth. And I will. Because faith doesn't mean folding your hands while wolves steal your home. Faith means standing up with the strength God gives you, even if the wolves have your blood. I gathered the papers, tucked them into my briefcase, and stood. For the first time since that letter arrived, I felt something other than despair. I felt resolve. My daughter had chosen greed over family. My son had chosen weakness over loyalty. But I would choose dignity. And before this storm ended, I would make them face what they had done. If you've stayed with me this far, type 1 in the comments. It lets me know you're still here, walking through this storm with me. The following Monday, I walked into the law offices of Oliver Kent, a man Rodney swore by. Oliver was younger than I expected, maybe in his 40s, but his eyes were sharp and steady. He listened without interrupting as I laid out every detail: the loan, the forged trust, the power of attorney Dana tricked me into signing. When I finished, he tapped his pen against a yellow pad. Mr. Whitaker, you're in a precarious position. Technically, the loan is in your name. Legally, you're liable. But if we can prove that the power of attorney was obtained fraudulently, we can challenge the loan and shift responsibility to your daughter and her husband. And Elliot? I added, my jaw tightening. Oliver nodded. Yes. His signature complicates things, but it also proves this was a conspiracy. The law tends to look favorably on victims your age, especially when there's evidence of manipulation. We need to act fast before they cement their control. His confidence steadied me. For the first time, I felt less like prey and more like a man with a shield. By Thursday, Oliver had filed an emergency petition with the county court. Judge Harmon, a name I remembered from the local paper, a man known for protecting seniors, granted us a temporary injunction. It gave me the right to occupy the Maple Hills property until the matter was resolved. Oliver handed me 2 brass keys. Mr. Whitaker, congratulations on your new home. But remember, you must actually move in or the injunction becomes worthless. I turned the keys in my palm. The weight was real, but heavier still was the thought a house my daughter stole from me would now be mine, at least for the moment. That night, I packed a single suitcase, a week's worth of clothes, my medications, Miriam's Bible, and the framed photo of her on our wedding day. She stood in her ivory dress, laughing as if she knew joy would outlast hardship. I placed it carefully on top of the folded shirts. Friday morning, Oliver pulled up in his sedan to drive me to Maple Hills. As we turned onto the wide boulevard lined with manicured hedges and stone fountains, my chest tightened. The houses loomed like castles, each one bigger than the last. Finally, we stopped before the mansion I'd already seen in Rodney's folder. White columns, a marble fountain glass that glittered in the sun. It was a palace, and it had been bought with my good name. I gripped my cane, stepped out of the car, and whispered a quiet prayer. Lord, I don't ask for riches. I ask for justice. If this house is mine for now, let it be a fortress of truth, not a monument to greed. The key slid smoothly into the lock. The door opened on silent hinges, and I stepped into a world that was nothing like my modest home. Marble floors, a chandelier that sparkled like ice, leather couches that smelled new, paintings hung just for decoration, without meaning or story. Oliver smiled. They spared no expense. I shook my head. All shine, no soul. Still, I walked through each room, touching the railings, peering into closets, listening to the echo of my footsteps. It felt surreal, like trespassing, though the law said otherwise. Upstairs in the master bedroom, I placed Miriam's photo on the nightstand. Her smile steadied me. "This room is too big for one man," I muttered, then added softly. "But not too big for your memory, Miriam." For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Not joy, not victory, but a calm resolve. The storm was far from over, but I wasn't hiding anymore. I was in the heart of the battlefield, standing tall, in the very house they had tried to steal. Saturday evening, the mansion hummed with life. Cars lined the driveway, engines, purring headlights sweeping across the marble fountain. Guests in designer clothes streamed inside, laughing, clinking glasses, admiring the chandeliers. Dana had always dreamed of Maple Hill's grandeur, and now she had it. Or so she thought. I dressed carefully for the night. A black suit, polished shoes, my silver hair combed neatly. The cane in my hand wasn't just for balance tonight. It was a staff of truth. As I looked in the mirror before leaving the upstairs bedroom, Miriam's photo smiled back at me. "Stand tall, Howard," I imagined her saying. "You've carried heavier loads before." Downstairs, the party was in full swing. The dining table groaned under platters of catered food, champagne bottles lined the counters. Eli moved among the crowd, with his salesman's grin, shaking hands, bragging about their new chapter. Dana, in a sequined dress, guided neighbors and colleagues on tours of the home. I saw the gleam in her eyes, the satisfaction of finally keeping up with the wealthy families she envied for years. No one noticed me at first. I stood near the grand staircase, silent, letting the scene wash over me. Then Dana froze mid-sentence when she caught sight of me. The color drained from her face. The wine glass in her hand tilted dangerously. "Dad," she whispered, voice barely audible. Guests turned curious. Eli spotted me next, his smile stiffening, his eyes narrowing like a wolf cornered. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. I lifted the keys and jingled them lightly. What any rightful homeowner would do, welcoming guests into his house. A hush spread across the room. Conversations halted, forks clinked against plates. Dana tried to laugh, her voice cracking. "Dad, don't be silly. You're just helping us. Hosting tonight." I stepped forward, cane tapping against marble, my voice carrying. "No, Dana. I'm not here as a helper. I'm here as the man whose name you stole. The man whose trust you broke. This house was bought with $500,000, taken in my name without my knowledge or consent." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A reporter from the Boulder Gazette, notebook in hand, leaned forward eagerly. Eli blustered, waving a hand. "That's absurd. He's confused. At his age, memory plays tricks." I slammed the cane against the floor. The sound cracked through the silence like a hammer on steel. At my age, I remember every bolt I drove into a bridge that still stands. I remember every vow I kept to my wife. Don't you dare mistake age for weakness. I know the truth, and I have the papers to prove it. Dana's lips trembled. "Dad, please. Not here. Not like this." "When then?" I demanded. "After you've bled me dry, after I've been left to pay debts you created while you drink champagne under stolen chandeliers." Murmurs grew louder. Guests looked at each other, eyebrows raised, whispers sharp. Some set down their glasses, uncomfortable. Others stared at Dana with open suspicion. Everything he's saying is a lie. Eli barked, sweat beading at his temples. We paid for this house ourselves. Then why is the deed in your name alone, Eli? I shot back. Why is the loan tied to my credit? Why did the notary who certified the papers disappear across state lines 2 months ago? Tell them that. Dana's shoulders shook, her eyes glistening with tears. Perry No Elliott, my middle son, stood near the bar, his face pale whiskey glass trembling in his hand. He avoided my eyes, but guilt was written all over him. I turned slowly, sweeping the room with my gaze. Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the intrusion, but I refuse to let my daughter and her husband drape themselves in luxury purchased by deceit. This house is not a symbol of their success. It is a monument to betrayal. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Then, like cracks spreading across glass, conversations broke out in shocked whispers. A neighbor coughed uncomfortably. The reporter scribbled furiously. Donna whispered again, "Broken dad." "Please," I straightened, voice firm. "The Lord teaches that truth sets us free. Tonight I claim my freedom, and I claim this house as mine until justice is done." The party, once filled with music and laughter, had turned into a courtroom, and I was no longer the quiet old man. I was the witness, the accuser, and the judge of my own dignity. The house was silent. After the last guest slipped out the echo of their heels and hurried goodbyes still hanging in the air. Half-empty champagne flutes littered the counters, and the smell of roasted lamb clung to the marble walls. But the grandeur of Maple Hills had cracked wide open. Dana stood by the staircase, mascara streaking her cheeks, her sequined dress now a costume of shame. Eli paced the living room like a caged animal, muttering curses under his breath. My middle son, Elliot, sat slumped on the leather sofa, staring at the floor, as though the truth had nailed his feet to the ground. I leaned on my cane, steady as the clock on the mantelpiece. "Well," I said softly, "the charade is over." Dana spun toward me, her voice breaking. "How could you humiliate us like that in front of everyone? The Gazette reporter was here. Dad, do you realize what you've done? What I've done?" My voice sharpened. I didn't forge a power of attorney. I didn't steal $500,000. I didn't gamble my father's good name for a house I couldn't afford. Eli slammed his fist against the mantel. "We were going to pay it back. You act like this is theft when it's just strategy." I shot him a look so cold he faltered. Strategy built on betrayal is theft in God's eyes and in the laws. Across the room, Marcus, my eldest son, who had stayed behind with his wife, Prudence, finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "Dana, is it true? Did you really do what Dad says?" Dana's shoulders crumpled. She whispered, "We only wanted a better life. Everyone else in Maple Hills has what we deserve. We were tired of scraping by." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "Prudence and I lived in an apartment for 10 years before we bought our modest home. We saved, we sacrificed. You wanted shortcuts, and you dragged Dad into it without his consent." Elliot finally lifted his face, eyes red. "It's my fault too," he admitted quietly. "I signed as witness. Dana told me it was for Dad's safety in case his memory failed. I should have asked more questions." The shame in his voice twisted something inside me. He looked like a boy again. Not the 43-year-old man he was, a boy caught stealing from the family jar. But forgiveness didn't come easily. Not when the wound was still raw. You thought my memory failed, I asked bitterly. I can still recite the specs of every bridge I built across this state. I can still quote Miriam's favorite psalm by heart. I haven't forgotten who I am, but maybe you've forgotten who you're supposed to be. Dana sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking. Eli pulled her close, though his eyes still smoldered with anger, not at guilt, but at being caught. Prudence wrapped an arm around Marcus's waist. "This family's torn apart," she whispered. "No," I said firmly, my cane tapping the marble with each word. "This family is divided between those who honor truth and those who trade it for greed." Silence filled the house again. In the corner, Elliot whispered, "Dad, what happens now?" I looked at each of them in turn. "Now you live with the consequences. The court will decide the legal punishment. God will decide the rest. As for me, I will not carry your debt. I will not be your scapegoat." Marcus met my gaze and gave a single nod. "We'll stand with you, Dad. Isabel and Paul adore you. You're not alone in this." For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. Betrayal had cracked one part of my family, but faith and honesty were gluing another part together. Behind me, the old clock chimed midnight. A new day had begun, one where truth had been spoken even if it broke the house in half. The next morning, the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. The marble floors still held faint footprints from the night before, and empty glasses sat abandoned like guilty witnesses. But for the first time in days, my heart wasn't racing with anger. Instead, it felt still. I brewed a pot of coffee in the cavernous kitchen and carried a cup out to the back patio. The air was crisp, the view of Maple Hill's manicured lawns almost surreal. For a moment, I thought about Miriam. I whispered aloud, "You'd have laughed at all this, wouldn't you? The chandeliers, the fountains, all shine, no substance." Halfway through my coffee, I heard the front door creak. My granddaughter Isabel peeked in, clutching her backpack. 16 years old, hair tied in a messy bun, sneakers squeaking on the marble. "Grandpa," she called timidly. I smiled. "Out here, sweetheart." She joined me on the patio, setting her backpack down with a thud. "Dad said you might be here." I just wanted to see you." Her eyes wandered around the sprawling backyard, the unfinished pool glinting in the sun. "Wow, this house is huge. But it feels kinda empty, doesn't it?" That simple observation struck deeper than any insult Dana had ever thrown at me. Out of the mouths of children comes truth. "You're right," I said softly. "A house without love is just walls and glass." Isabel sat across from me, pulling a notebook from her bag. "Grandpa, can I do homework here sometimes? It's quieter than home. And maybe you could tell me stories about the bridges you built." Something warmed inside me. She wasn't here for the mansion or the luxury. She was here for me. "Of course," I said, smiling. "This house has plenty of space. You'll bring it to life." Later that week, she came again and again. Soon she'd curl up in the study with her books, while I read the Bible aloud, just like I used to with Miriam. Sometimes we'd share grilled cheese sandwiches in the kitchen, laughing when the cheese stretched into long strings. For the first time since Miriam passed, the rooms echoed with genuine laughter, and it wasn't just Isabel. Neighbors began to appear at my doorstep, curious about the scandal they'd read in the paper. A widow from across the street, Eleanor Briggs, brought me an apple pie and invited me to the Maple Hills Book Club. "We could use a male perspective," she teased with a knowing smile. Another neighbor, Howard Kingsley, a retired architecture professor, stopped by with a chess set. "Engineers usually make decent chess players," he said. "Come prove me right." I accepted both invitations. Why not life had given me a new chapter, whether I asked for it or not. Soon my calendar looked busier than it had in years. Tuesday's book club at Eleanor's, where I surprised the ladies by comparing novels to bridges. Both need strong foundations. Thursday's chess games at the community center, where I relearned strategy and patience. Saturday's Isabel helping me plant flowers in the backyard. It was strange. A house born of betrayal was slowly becoming a place of healing. One night after Isabel left, I sat on the patio with Eleanor. We shared a quiet glass of iced tea, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. "You've had a stormy season, Howard," she said gently. "But storms can clear the air." I nodded, staring at the horizon. "I lost a daughter, Eleanor, but I found a granddaughter. I lost trust in my blood, but I found friends and strangers. Maybe that's the Lord's way of reminding me family isn't just who shares your name. It's who shares your respect." She reached over, squeezing my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The mansion no longer felt like a stolen prize. It felt like a new beginning. 2 months passed since that night when I stood before 30 people and tore the mask off my own daughter. Time has a way of sorting wheat from chaff. By now, the fallout was clear. Dana and Eli's world was collapsing. Eli lost several high-profile clients after the Gazette article made the rounds. Who would trust their savings to a man who scammed his father-in-law? Dana's real estate agency quietly pushed her out, not wanting her name tied to fraud. The Lexus was sold, the designer handbags disappeared, and whispers of them moving into a cramped apartment floated through the Maple Hills grapevine. I didn't rejoice in their downfall. Truth be told, I pitied them. They'd chased luxury so hard that they lost not only their reputation, but also their family's trust. Still, I felt no obligation to rescue them. Miriam used to say, mercy doesn't mean shielding someone from consequences. Sometimes mercy is letting them learn. And I, at 72, finally understood. One Saturday morning, I brewed coffee in the marble kitchen, still surreal to call mine, and opened Miriam's Bible. My fingers traced Psalm 27. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Those words hit different now. I had feared my age, my children's betrayal, even the shame of being seen as a helpless old man. But God had carried me through all of it. Not only did I still stand, I stood taller. Marcus visited that afternoon with Prudence and their children. Isabel rushed inside, first dropping her backpack on the couch and hugging me around the waist. "Grandpa, I got an A on my history paper, the one you helped me with." I laughed, ruffling her hair. "That's your work, Isabel. I just made sure you had the bridge strong enough to carry the load." Marcus pulled me aside while Prudence and Isabel set the table. His voice was quieter than I'd heard in years. "Dad, I just want you to know, I'm proud of you. You didn't let them break you. If anything, you're stronger now." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Marcus had always been steady, but hearing his respect spoken out loud, that was a gift no mansion could match. Later, we sat in the backyard, the sun casting gold across the unfinished pool. Isabel planted daisies in a bed along the fence, her laughter ringing like music. Prudence served sweet tea. Marcus talked about his students at the high school, and I thought, this is wealth. Not the chandeliers, not the granite counters. This, family who shows up, grandchildren who laugh without judgment, neighbors who wave when they pass by, friends who invite you to play chess or debate books. I realized then that Dana's betrayal had given me something I didn't know I needed: freedom. Freedom from being the invisible old man shuffled to the side of his children's busy lives. Freedom from feeling like I had to tolerate disrespect, because that's just how kids are these days. My life wasn't over. It was starting again. When Marcus and his family left that evening, I sat alone under the porch light cane, resting against my chair, Bible on my lap. I prayed out loud, "Lord, thank you for carrying me through. Thank you for reminding me that dignity isn't given by children or banks or signatures. It comes from you. And I will walk in that truth as long as I draw breath." For the first time in years, I felt Miriam close. Not in sorrow, but in peace, as if she were whispering, "You're not obsolete, Howard. You're renewed." The night air was cool, and I breathed it in like medicine. I had lost a daughter to greed, but I gained a new life in faith, family, and freedom. And that, I thought, is the kind of wealth no thief can steal. Summer had always been Miriam's favorite season. She used to say the sun in Colorado had a way of softening even the hardest memories. And on that summer evening in Boulder, as I stood in the backyard of the mansion my daughter had stolen in my name, I realized she was right. The house that began as a wound had become a place of renewal. I decided to host a gathering. Not a glittering soiree with champagne towers the way Dana and Eli would have done, but something simpler, something real. I called it a neighborhood barbecue, but in my heart it was a dedication, a claiming of this house not as a monument to fraud, but as a home rebuilt on truth. Marcus and Prudence arrived first, Isabel bouncing out of the car with her wildflower bouquet. She ran inside barefoot on the marble and placed the flowers in Miriam's vase. "Grandpa, this house feels alive now," she said, tugging my sleeve. "Because you're here." Her words steadied me more than scripture, more than law. Out of the mouths of children comes truth. The neighbors followed Eleanor Briggs from across the street, pie in hand. Howard Kingsley with his chessboard tucked under one arm. Rodney, my old investigator friend, carrying root beer and his dry wit. By the time the grill was lit, the yard was humming with laughter. Children splashed their feet in the half-finished pool. Women swapped recipes under the string lights Isabel had helped me hang. And men debated politics with the fervor of youth. I stood at the grill, flipping burgers, watching the scene with quiet awe. For months I had lived in silence, betrayed by my own daughter. Now the air was full of joy, and it was mine to share, mine to guard. This, I thought, is wealth. Not the marble, not the fountain out front, but the laughter of people who choose to stand beside you. As dusk settled, someone turned on music. Eleanor surprised me by extending her hand. "Howard," she said with a playful smile, "don't just stand there. Dance." I chuckled, but I let her pull me in. My steps were clumsy at first, but soon muscle memory returned. Neighbors clapped, Isabel squealed with delight, and for a moment I felt Miriam's presence. I could almost hear her whisper, "You see, life isn't over yet." When the music faded, I tapped my cane against the railing. The crowd hushed. Faces turned toward me, expectant. I cleared my throat. "Friends, I began a few months ago. I received a letter that shattered me. It said I'd taken out a loan for $500,000. At 72, I had never borrowed a dime in my life. That loan was forged by my own daughter." A murmur swept through the group. I raised my hand. But here's the truth. Betrayal does not define us. My dignity didn't vanish with her signature. Because dignity doesn't come from banks or even from family ties. It comes from God, from standing in truth, and from choosing to live with honor no matter what others do. I looked around the crowd at Marcus with pride in his eyes, at Isabel beaming at neighbors who had become friends. I lost a daughter, yes, but I gained a granddaughter who believes in me. I gained a community that welcomed me as their own. I gained freedom from fear. The Lord turned betrayal into blessing, ashes into beauty. And if He can do it for me, He can do it for anyone here. The applause that followed was not polite but heartfelt, the kind that warms your bones. Isabel threw her arms around me, whispering, "You're the bravest grandpa in the world." As the stars pierced the darkening sky, I whispered a prayer. Thank you, Lord, for carrying me through. Thank you for reminding me that even at 72, life can begin again. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an old man waiting to fade. I felt like a man reborn. If this story moved, you don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and follow Brian's Story for more powerful family drama stories that prove dignity, faith, and freedom never grow old.